We're now in the Maimon Be'elet Tel Shemaim V'Aretz, and it was stated that the sort of the Keseres, the introduction to this Maimon, that this was going to be the explanation of the shit of Midas Harach and Midas Hadin. And so, after having spent 3 Maimarim of Shavi Yisrael, Rav Mashmi Atzeres, explaining what the notion of Midas Hadin and what the world would have looked like if the world was created Midas Hadin, now we're going to go on to the shit of Midas Harachim. However, before we do that, the first half of this Maimah is going to discuss another aspect of creating the world Midas Hadin. So, what we've done so far in the first year was sort of a chazara of the ideas of Lulav Rav and Yemesh Atzeres. We're talking according to the second pshat of Lulav Rav and Yemesh Atzeres, not according to the first pshat of Shavi Yisrael. We will go back to the first pshat of Shavi Yisrael and explain something along the similar lines on Amud Ayin Vav. But for the meantime, we're talking about Pirush HaBeis. And we've explained, just like we explained, what would have been the impact if Midas Hadin would have been a Helen Behest Nalikus. That Midas Hadin is Midas HaTimtzum. That through the Tzimtzumim, Tzimtzum Arishim Be'ikah, it called there to be the notion of Yashus, the Helen Behester. And gradually, for more and more Tzimtzumim in the Eire, Rakav, Achar Tzimtzum, Eiris of Atzilus, those Tzimtzumim of Zah, Kaved Malchus Chimeu Ugvuros Chayila Beiru, then the Eisius, Hadibur of Malchus, the Levushim of Malchus, were Bechinas Yash. And therefore they were Mailim or Master to such an extent that you were able to create Nivroim of Eilam Biyah, which were Bechinas Yash V'Dov and Nifra B'fnei Atzmei. Okay? And that the whole purpose of that was there should be a tiny bit Maluchas. The Eibusha could have separate entities that will be able to be makabel on themselves the Malchus Shamayim. That was the whole kavanah of all the Tzimtzumim. So that's why the Eibusha wanted to create the world, Midas Hadin, to fulfill that objective. But we said at the end of Yemesh Atzeres that the outcome would have been that a person would have to constantly muster up from the Etzem HaNefesh, the Koyach HaToikif, the ability to withstand this Yenis could have been such an unbelievable Nisayin, such a hell of a Hest and Olikus. And that would have been too much. So the whole emphasis was on the individual and the impact of creating the world Midas Hadin, the Eina Olam Yochel Iskayim, the emphasis both, and it was the same as Shavi Yisrael, the Olam here is the Olam Zeh Adam, Olam Katan Zeh Adam, that the human being would be unable to manage a world that was created purely and solely with Midas Hadin. But in this Maimon, in the first half, is emphasizing another Nakuda, that beyond the individual Aveda Pratis, Bichlal, in Olam, there would have been a proliferation of Ra and Klippa. Because when you have Tzimtzum, the Klippa is able to be Makabel Chayas and Unika from it. And so, a very extreme and to the point of exclusive creation, which would have only been Midas Hadin, he would have had a very large proliferation of Klippa and Ra and evil. Right? So that's what we said last time. We're now going to emphasize that more in the context of the Miyut HaYereach, the reduction of the moon. So this is a concept that's going to explain how originally the sun and the moon were of equal stature, both light-producing entities, and there was a miyut hayerech, a reduction of the moon, that it would no longer be a ma'ir itself to produce oir. Please, we're trying to know. It's disruptive. Say hi and say bye. And the moon now becomes a makabel from the sun. So there's a change of status. Whereas the sun and the moon were of equal status, through the Miyat HaYareach, there was a reduction in, there was a change in the hierarchy of things. And that's going to be the context. And we're going to say how, were it not to have been that case, were it not to have had that tzimtzum in the moon, and the moon is a reference to Malchus, the Levana, the Makabel, and the sun is a reference to Zah. So we're going to use quite a bit of Kabbalistic language in the next section. But the same nakuda that we were talking about till now is just going to be associated with that. It's not going to be actually any significant hisafa in the point that we're trying to make. Just a more of a broadening of the discussion on it. Okay? Amud Ayin Gimel. V'lachein, and therefore, mimiyut hayereach, from the reduction, the diminishing of the moon, ma'oiris chasa. So in the pasuk where it says ma'oiris, the beginning in Yom Daled of Ma'aser Bereishis, it uses the term ma'oiris, but it spells it without the vavs. So it's chaser. It's lacking those vavs. So it's an indication of there being a miyut, a reduction. So nimshach inikas achitzainim, and from the act of miyut hayareach, it enables there to be a unika for the chitzainim, for the clippers and Ashton's clippers noiga, and then even worse, shalosh clippers atmeis, there can be a hemshekh to them. That enables, it facilitates, as we said, the clipper is able to be makabel through tzimtzumim. When the Eileh is very matzumtzum, there can be a unique zachitzainim. Do you remember the explanation we gave to that? That I gave a mashal of an idea, of an ideology, that as soon as it gets reduced to the point of being unrecognizable from its source, it hasn't got the protective features that keep it within a certain boundaries of thought. And it's possible that people can misuse it and misplace it. Like we had in the thing of no, I'll give that one. So that was the mashal I gave, yeah, to better understand. If there would have been the intensity of the oil of the yerech, the way it was originally, what is the yerech? Shulbechinas Malchus. This is the madrega of Malchus. We always associate the moon with Malchus. Just like it was prior to this contestation. They were both ma'oris, and they were both gedolim, the shemesh and the yereach. The zon hayakesa echad l'shneim, the zocha and the keva, meaning zon and malchus. They each, there was one kesa for them both. Bechinas tiferes the eimish nasa kesa l'zon. It was the madrega tiferes of bina, ema bina, which becomes the kesa for zon. Also hayemei b'malchus ribu'ay. Then there was no sort of material, there was no difference, so there wasn't such a difference between Zah and Malchus. They both had a ribu'ay. Shaisa makabeles kamkein me avo, me abba ve'ema. That Malchus as well received. It wasn't the seidish taushlos of Chachma to Bina, then to Zah and to Malchus. Zah and Malchus together received the same kesa. They received the same hashpah from Chachma and Bina. Paya oz zun zachin nekeva k'may ava k'may abba ve'ema. They were all of the same madrega. They all had the same gilu'ay. To k'may shebina mekabla imre kesa. Just like we say that Bina receives its oy from where? From kesa. That even though it goes through a process of where it's being mekabel from Chachma, that is the seder kesa Chachma Bina. Because makim how do you mekabel it from kesa? It still is mekabel from kesa. Why? Because Chachma and Bina are the trainer and the limis passion. These two entities that are of the same level. Malchus, so it should be Kumei King, or maybe it should be Kumei King, or I suppose you could read Kumei. Anyway, Kumei King Hoisa Malchus Gam Kim Mekabelas Mi'ava. Malchus would also then receive from Ava. and be of the same status as them. And then everything that would have been nimshach from malchus would have also been without any helen behester.
What would have been its identity then, as opposed to the sun?
It's a different keli.
It would have the same.
It would have the same oy. The
so,
oy would
so
not
it
be
would be
reduced.
a different keli, but on the same level.
Mm-hmm. So, if you're using the mashal of the partis of the different colored glass, so one will be a blue glass, one will be a green glass. But that wasn't the difference in the oy. So it produces a different color. So it's a different hagbola of some sort, but it's not a difference in intensity. So it'll be more of a horizontal. It won't be such a vertical hierarchy. It'll be a horizontal, be a spectrum in a more of a horizontal plane rather than a vertical plane. We're going to explain this. So now we've just used the Isis HaKabbalah, and we're sort of not going to run too far away from the Isis HaKabbalah. This is, as I said to you when we started the Maimah, that you have quite a bit of Isis HaKabbalah here. But he's going to give it a bit more context. Now, what is it? How does something transition from one madrega to another madrega and not fundamentally change? How's it not Helen Behester? Like, what is this? What is exactly going on here? So you'll see. Let's read. So the explanation of this, of what we've just described in the previous paragraph, which was just statements, it wasn't hasbara, just stated that was the case. Now we're going to give the hasbara. So in the Eitz Chaim, it tells us how in the four Eilemis Abiyah, in Atzilus you have the Gilu HaChochma, in Bri you have the Gilu HaBina, in Yitzir you have Gilu Zah, and in Asi you have Gilu Malchus. And I say Gilu, I mean it is the dominant hashpah, the dominant force, the culture, the nature of that Eilam is light, is according to that sphere. Okay? Sheklolos ha'oir ba'atzilus meir b'bechinas chachma. That is the klolistic identity of the Eiros of Atzilus. They have the characteristics of chachma. Chachma is the madriga bittul, right? Absolute bittul. So even though chachma in Atzilus is transferred through to the next sphere al yidei bina. So where does Zah receive its hashpah? It receives it from bina, even though so does it mean you're saying it's all from chachma? It's be'ikar chachma, but you're saying it's al yidei bina. The vart is eina bina meshameshes rak lebechinas ma'avir levad el eirin soif hamulubash teicha hachachma el yena ba'oiva derech bina la'atzilus. So the function of bina is as a ma'avir levad, as an act of it is able to it transfers the Eirein Seif, which was melubash in Chachma, that it should be nimshach to Zah. It transfers it. But bina doesn't function as a mesech malbish. It's not b'derech his slabshus. It's b'derech ma'avir. And this is the distinction he wants to make. The bina functions as a ma'avir, not a malbish. And as such, because the oir is not mislabish in bina, bina does not change or alter the oir to becomes, so that it acquires the qualities of bina. It remains the oir chachma primarily. Just been transferred by bina, because it's the function of bina serves as a ma'avir, not as a malbish. As now it's going to explain. But hefresh bein ma'avir le'islapshus yedua. It's well known this difference between a ma'avir and when it's b'islapshus. The hislapshus kisha madrega eliyona me b'hamadrega tachtoina u'misachid u'misatzim ima u'mishtanen lemuhusa. Umemela, mashe mein hamadrega tachtoin, lamash lamatre mimenu, ubechinas eir hamadrega tachtoin. Hislapshus is the vart, the eir hamalubosh, the oil which is going to become enclosed in the milabeshes, the thing that's going to enclose it, that the nature of that enclothement is it becomes misachid and misatzim. We're not talking about a levush hanifrat. Hislapshus is in a way of a levush hamiyuchad, that the two things become so intertwined that you can't then distinguish one from the other. There's a hisgavrus, there's a dominance of the kli over the o which is melubish, and that kli owns it, it dominates it, and they become fully associated with the identity of the kli, such that when that od v'keli, that melubosh and malbeshes, the malabeshes, are then going to have a hashpah on the next madrega, the identity of the thing that they're going to be mashpia is going to be of the identity of the keli. So, as I've told you, I believe before, my mashal for this, that when you have a train that is coming from London to Manchester, in Manchester, which is the makabel of the place of the makabel of the train, it will say on the notice board that this train is a London to Manchester train. This train comes from London. What does it mean it comes from London? It means the passengers on that train, what is melubish in that train, are passengers from London. Yeah? Now, the reality of train tracks is there's no direct train track from London to Manchester. The London to Manchester train track goes through multiple other stations. It has stations along the way. This is a direct train. Doesn't mean the direct train didn't go through Birmingham. But in this instance, it's a direct train, and therefore it didn't stop in Birmingham. So it didn't pick up any passengers in Birmingham. Birmingham served merely as a means by which the train can become the passengers in the train from London can be transferred to Manchester. It's derech ma'avir. So there's no meaning to put on the notice board in Manchester. This is a train from Birmingham. In what sense is it from Birmingham? Not denying the fact it went through Birmingham, but there are no passengers from Birmingham on the train. No passengers from London got off the train in Birmingham. There's no shilling.
Why would they?
So the value, you can still say this is a train from London, even though it went through Birmingham. The oil that comes from Chochmah in Atzilus to Zoh, even though it comes through Binah, you don't say that now it complicates the situation, and they say now Atzilus is not really like it says in the Eitz Chaim, Atzilus Abba Ilah Mekanan Atzilus, because you have this hashpah derech Binah. No, because the hashpah derech Binah is derech Ma'ivil Levad. However, if the train from London stopped off in Birmingham to drop off passengers and pick up new passengers in Manchester, now on the notice board, there's two bits of information. It's not denying the fact this is a train from London, but it's a train from London via Birmingham. And what you makabel in Manchester are not only Londoners, but also people from Birmingham. Yeah? So that will be the hislapshus, because it stopped there. So once it stops in Birmingham, it picks up the identity of Birmingham. So you can make in b'derech nimshol that if the hashpah comes b'derech hislapshus, then the hashpah to the next madrega, u'meila mashem mei ha-madrega tachtoina, l'mashal mata mimenu, u'bechinas oir b'madrega tachtoina. Yeah?
Yeah.
U'k'moi k'sha oirach chachmu b'hislapshus b'bina. Oz hemshekh bina lezob b'chinas ha'oir de bina. That's when you talk about chokhmah as in b'derech hislapshus. Masha enkin k'shu b'chinas ma'avi levad. Ima yoishu poil she'al yoda yuchel liyos nimshach lamadrega shlamata mimenu. Aval eina meshanes ha'oir klal. When it's derech ma'avi. V'nimtza. So what do we know from all of this? So even though we know the Seder Ishtalshlus is that Zun, Zal Malchus and Makabel from Bina. Ki aim abonim, as we say in the Pasuk, the aim of the bonim. Chachman Bina is Abba ve'ema, and Zal Malchus is Ben and Bas. So it's aim abonim. Im kolzeh eina masteres ma'alemes klal al eira chachma. Shebe soicha oirein soif mamish. We know from the important Hagah in Perek Lamed Hei of Tanya, the in chachma is meir oirein soif. Yulav adi huva ein zulasei. Ela she oirein soif amalush b'chachma elyeina oivet derech ba. K'may derech moshel ha'oir ha'nimshach u'meir derech zuchuchis behira ha'nikra aspaklaria ha'mi'ira. She'en kan shum hester klal. So there's a means by which something can be conveyed and transferred and it's not diminished. Yeah? So yeah. Okay? Now.
Right.
Is that okay? For now?
Yeah, just in the Nimshal, why do you need Bina Bechlal or Chochma Bechlal if it doesn't do anything?
It does do something.
What does it
It's
do?
ma'avir.
Why do you need it to be Mavir? If the whole point is that it doesn't make a difference, it doesn't change anything, surely the only reason why you need something in between is because if this can't get to there. It needs this in between.
Right.
If it doesn't do anything, then it's not.
It directs it. It directs it. So, Chachma, in its pristine state, is beyond sort of an awareness or a sensitivity to the needs of Zon Malchus. So, whereas Bina is. So, Bina, whilst it's not changing the own, it's affecting where it's going. So, you could say that's also an impact.
It's not an impact in a way of, it's not changing anything.
It's not, yeah.
Just funneling it.
Right. So we're going to see soon a difference between Tzimtzum and Hester. So there is a Tzimtzum. Because once the train goes through Birmingham, it can't go to Cambridge. Right?
Right.
That itself is a Tzimtzum. You want a train in London, can go to multiple places. Go to Cambridge, you can go the other way, and go to Brighton. As soon as it's going through Derech Ma'ivir of Birmingham, already the options have changed. So it's a Tzimtzum.
Right.
But it's not a Hester.
You thought this muscle through, I see.
It's a Tzimtzum, but it's not a Hester.
Right.
And if you wait, so you're going to see there's a difference between a Tzimtzum and a Hester. It's going to be a very valuable distinction.
Okay.
So you're right, though. You're right to pick this up. There is a Tzimtzum involved in this. But the argument he's making is that it doesn't make a shinui in the O. Okay. Ma'asha enkein bechinas hislapshus hu halem v'hester chuli. Slapshus is the pshat, there's a halem v'hester. Ma'ivir is the pshat, there's no shinu. There's no halem v'hester. Tzayne loima, she'eini miskala bechinas oir hamalubosh, ki im ha-bechina v'hamadriga hamalbeshes chuli, ki yudua ukanal. So, it's just spelling out the argument, yeah?
Okay.
Good. The hine. Now. Kaven shezun. Zochen keva. Zon malchus.
What can that be a first keep of Zovenopra? Why can't that be a Rosh Tibus of Zov and Nukva?
Why would it be Zav and Nukva?
That's what we're speaking about.
Zah goes with Malchus, and Zah and Nukva doesn't.
Make any sense?
Zah and female. Zeh Ampin and Nukva and female. Zocha Nakeva.
Zah as in Zah and then Nukva as in Malchus.
But why would you be using the Toya Nukva for Malchus, and then using the Toya Zeh Ampin for the Vav Midris?
It's still there calling
It's
it.
just using two different systems. Zah and Malchus is a pair. Zocha and Nakeva are a pair. Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
They refer to the same thing generally, no?
So, yeah, but if you want to call it, if that makes you happy, then you can call it that. Kaven Shazun. I just don't want, and the reason I'm sort of spelling it out every time is I want you to realize that we're using different terminology all the time. We're going to start talking about moon and this and everything. We're talking about the same thing, just using different terms. And so you want to, the idea is pretty smooth, and the thing is just because the terminology is changing, you don't want to, so I just want to repeat the terms so we're on the same page. Kaven Shazach Nukva. Zach of the Nukva. Actually, Zach and the Keva. With the Chav and Nukva, if it would be in the Aramaic. Zah Malchus. Hayugam King Shnei Hama'oris Hagadolim Al Derech Chochma Ubina. So basically, the whole of Atzilus, from Chochma till Malchus, are like pairs of Ma'oris Hagadolim. Shoy Shneihem Mishtamshim Bekesa Echad. Bechinas Tiferes Ta'ava Abba Ve'ema Chachman Bina. Yesh Loimar Shayoreach Loi Hayamaylim Klal Al Eira Shemesh. Yeah, it was all good. Shnei Ameiros Agdolim. It was just Gilui. There was no Helen Behester
Right.
between the Madregas of Chachma to Malchus. Ki im shayinimshach al yodei kumoy al yidei aspaklaria denaro. Yeah,
What's in that?
same as the Meir.
Like Niharo means to light up, right?
Yeah, Nara is light.
And the era is
That shines. And aspaklaria had the Nara and aspaklaria that shines.
Is one like a mirror and one like a magnifying glass?
I don't think it's no, I think it's a mirror. I think it's talking about the problem. I didn't want to say magnifying glass because then it actually
Changes.
it sort of changes it.
Right.
I just think it might be more of like a seeing glass, like what we have glasses, where it helps you. It's not Milam or Master. It helps you see the thing, but it doesn't. If you describe it like you have in the Bar Mitzvah Maimah, the idea of a Vergrößerung.
Vergrößerung beyond their glass.
Yeah. So I think it means more like clarity glasses rather than magnifying glasses. So there was no Helen Behester. There was no Helen Behester in Bina because it was Derech Maiva, it wasn't Derech Islapshus, and similar all the way down to Malchus. The Nimtza, so then what do we derive from this? What is the outcome of all of this? Similarly, from Malchus to Atzilus, the Gilu would have also been without any Helen Behester. Till Eileh Ma'asiyah, which Makabel from Malchus, the Oifim Ba'asiyah, like we say in the Zohar, in the Etikun Zohar about the different Malachim, Ifanim Ba'asiyah. Hayamei ha'oir kamei b'yitzira ha'makabel mizah. So Chochma is in Atzilus, Bina is in Bria, Zoh is in Yitzira, and Malchus in Asiyah, and everything would have been Gilu. There wouldn't have been any Helen Behester. Hayamei וכלולוס הגילו היו באופן אחר שהיה גילו בחינס העיר דאבו דאבא ואמא חוכמה בינה וממילא היו מוקים יניקס החיצונים כלל. With such a gilu there would be no mokim יניקס החיצונים, which is his whole point is trying to make. Im haya, we started off today in the top line. Im haya ribu eir hayareach shu bechinas malchus k'may shay kaidem kitrug shay bechinas shnei ameiros hagadolim there wouldn't be Yinikas Achitzenim. Yinikas Achitzenim is from the Miyat HaYerech. Because if there would have been Ribu Ha'Ereach, then there would have been Shloi B'chinas Hester Klal. This is what he's trying to, this next paragraph is explaining that paragraph. Lo Yoi B'chinas Hester Klal. This is what he's saying. Klal is Hagiloi B'ifan Achesh, Hagilu B'chinas Ha'er Da'ava, Chachma Bina, because there's no Helen Behester of Chachma Bina in Zon Malchus. And Zon Malchus, the whole world would just be Gilu Meilu Lo Yomakim Yinikas Achitzenim Klal. Shlo Yoi Efshel Makabel Min HaKedusha, because they can't be Makabel from Kedusha. They can't even be Makabel from Tzimtzum Ha'eris. Calls a man, there's a Gilu Oir, and there's a clarity in that Oir. There's no mocking for the Yinikas Achitzenim. Not saying they wouldn't exist. Forget, it doesn't mean they wouldn't exist. They would exist with a different function, but they couldn't. They could only exist to do what the Eibishter wants. They couldn't. They couldn't get Tosfos Yinika. I'm not denying that they
wouldn't
would
get
exist.
them from our Averis. They couldn't get it from the beer itself.
Ki loy nimshach ha'oir v'achayis rak b'mokim habitul shesham sheira ein soif. Like we have in today's Tanya Perek Vav. Ma she'en kem b'chinas yesh she'ein lebatul hari ein ani v'hu chuli. Okay, so in this world where there would have been no tzimtzumim, there would have been no tzimtzum ha'oir, or more, to be more accurate, there wouldn't have been hester ha'oir, helen v'hester ha'oir, there would not have been Yinikas Achitzenim. So ultimately, the impact of creating the world in Midas Hadin and having tzimtzumim is a Tosfos Yinika L'Chitzenim. That is one of the additional downsides. Chotch, it would have been a fantastic thing. That have been Helen Vesor, because you'd have a Yesh V'dov and Nifra that's able then to be Makabel Il Malchus Shemayim B'Bechirosi HaChovshis. Everyone can freely choose to be Makabel Il Malchus Shemayim, and that would give the Eibishter tremendous tainuk. But at the same time, there would be a dangerous expansion of the realm of Klippa and Ra. Okay? This is what he's going to now explain. But once there was the diminution of the moon, which the pshat of that is that we're now saying that Malchus is not makabel directly from Chachma Bina, but derech Ma'ivir ki im mizah. And not just mizah. We no longer say that Zon Malchus Kesa Echad Lishneihem and then Makabel Kesa from Avah Tiferes the Eiman Asa Kesa Zon Malchus, and it was no. Now there's a proper hierarchy, a vertical hierarchy, where the Eir is Mitzumtzum and Malchus is only Makabel from the way it's the Eir from Chachma is Mislabish and Bina, Mislabish and Zah, and then it's Makabel from Zah, and not only from Zah, maybe B'chinas Achreina Shabai. Begam Zeh, but B'chinas Islabshus B'malchus, Shemis'al Mistate Ha'Eir Chulikana. The Eir becomes hidden and concealed. Be'eina Mei Ozerak B'chinas Eir Mitzumtzum, just like we described, Kvei Malchus Chiyemeru Gvuraski Daberu, it's through Gvuris, the Zah, the Eir is Mitzumtzum. As al yedei b'chinas ishtalshus madreg l'madreges nismayet ha'er yeser u'be'inyan hamiyut nischadesh shloi levad zoi shemistzamtzim yeser hari hu mistate yeser chuli oz yuchlu gam him lekabel. A fantastic, very interesting bracketed sentence there. That through once you have the Eir Mitzumtzum in Malchus, then what happens? You have further ishtalshus and madreges, and the Eir is more reduced. And he says, regarding this miyut, there's a chidush, because now it's no longer just tzimtzum, it's also hester. And once you have hester, tzimtzum alone is not going to give a Yinika L'Chitzonim. Just because the Eir is mitzumtzum, it's not enough. It has to be musta, nelam musta. It has to be hidden, concealed. Because okay, you can have it just like I was talking my moshel from last time about the ideology. It can be a mitzumtzum, but it's still the same thing. It's the same thing which is matzumtzum. It's reduced. To reduce something doesn't mean to change it. Whereas Helen Vehester is the pshat, you're changing it. You're concealing it to the point where it's no longer apparent. It's obviously present. But the tzimtzum can get to such a point, like you get to where he talks about in the memoriam of Nisyonis, of like Yudbeis Tammuz Yud Aleph, Chaticha Atzma Nasis Nevela, that something could become so all consumed that the Eir and Kedusha is completely hidden and concealed in it entirely. That's Helen Behester. Tzimtzum would not have brought about all the things we're talking about. They wouldn't have been able to makabel. An opnimi, which is matzumtzum, is still an opnim. It's still beseder. It works. And there's a mamash geschmack footnote of the Rebbe in Bossi Legani Tovshin Amad Aleph. Look at Hey, where the Rebbe puts it into similar to this the way it's like over here. Obviously, they don't cross-reference because for whatever reason they very rarely cross-reference around that. But the word here is, he says, he's talking about the parsa in the Pnim of the Maimah, talking about a parsa, which is shidugmus hamoshel shemachase umaste ala seichel shebeseichel. That the parsa is mechase umaste. Remember, we've been talking about tzimtzum and parsa. So that it says machase umaste. It says there in the footnote, Masha enkein hat tzimtzumim shlifnei haparsa. Einam mastirim. The tzimtzumim shlifnei haparsa. So the parsa is be'ein malchus l'biyah. So you have tzimtzumim in Eilam Atzilus. The point being, tzimtzumim shlifnei haparsa einam mastirim.
So the ones where Atzilus?
Yeah, they're not mastirim. V'lachem ba'atzilus elikus hu begilui, ele sha'gilu hu b'tzimtzum. Atzilus is like ma'achtus iyu v'chayu yichad iyu v'gamu yichad. Atzilus is elikus. There's a big difference between tzimtzum b'derech miut and a parsa. A parsa is mailim u'mastir. Now, sometimes you'll find in Chassidus where it uses the word tzimtzum, it means that too. Because here it's being machalik, it's creating this very, very interesting distinction that from tzimtzumim alone, if you just think about tzimtzum b'derech miut, you're not going to give a yinika l'chitzonim.
Right.
Because it's still going to be apparent what the thing is. It's not going to change it. It's not going to be a shinui. Even if it's b'derech hislapshus. Even b'derech hislapshus. Like what you were saying, the bina must be doing something. So that's derech ma'ivah. But even if it was derech hislapshus, there's a manner in which the tzimtzum doesn't have to be ma'ilem u'mastir.
Even if it's derech tzimtzum.
Even if yeah. But once it's the parsa, then it's ma'ilem u'mastir. So here we've got this extra phase where he says here, ואיני מעוז רק בכינס מצומצם, אז על ידי בכינס השתלש מדרג נשמעת היועסה, ובעניין המית נסחדש, לבד זוי שמצמצם יסר, הרי מסתת יסר. Yeah, that's sort of like what it's referring to here in the footnote as well. Oz yuchel gam hem makabel. Then they're able to do makabel. So for sure there's going to be a tzimtzum ha'oy in Atzilus. Some form or other, some more, some less. But that's tzimtzum derech miut. It's not Helen Vehester. But the miut hayareach, this miut hayareach, this the way that the no longer the moon, no longer Malchus is going to be on the same madrega as Zoh, and ultimately in the same madrega as Chacham and Bina. What that causes is a tzimtzum, such a tzimtzum, which is also b'derech Helen Vehester, which we usually call parsa. He gives another mashal, v'al derech, like it says in the pasuk Karachel ifnei geizazeho ne'elama, that the sheep before its shearer goes silent. What's the inyan of the sheep? The sheep has hair, so the hair is the ultimate tzimtzum, right? That. And here we're talking about hair which is getting cut off from its source. Because if you think that hair is a living thing, something that grows from the body, but it goes through a tzimtzum otzim. It comes through the skull. So it's a massive parsa, hemshekh between what's chutz leguf and inside the body. The hair grows out of it, so it's considered an own matzumtzum b'yesa. To the extent you can cut it, it doesn't hurt. Pull it, it hurts a little bit, but even that doesn't hurt too much.
It's only hurt because of
So
what's inside.
nails and hair are the example of an own matzumtzum b'yesa, right? So the rochel if negay zeh alama the hainu lefisha mitzamsim lahoyer al yidei cyrus, since the tzimtzum was to such an extent that it should produce hair, which is the mashal for here, which is talking about an own matzumtzum b'yesa, azayuchul liyos b'chinas geizer zeha. They can come to a state of there being geizer zeha, of shiras, lahafrid achayis mimakayre, to completely separate it. Then there can be unikas achitanim. When you have an own matzumtzum, then you can have the oil can go to then the thing can be hemshekh to such a place where you can have be nifred the gamri from where it comes from. Kol ze goram bechinas miyut hayerech. It was all caused by the reduction in the moon. Shul bechinas hester oil. It's a state of affairs. So the introduction of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is such a way what we were saying before, that the whole creation of midas hadin. All of the beer of Lulav Arava and all the beer of Yom Hashmini Atzeres. The Tzimtzum Ha'oir. Ultimately, we have Tzimtzum Ha'oir, so it can be hidden and concealed by Malchus. And then Malchus can then create Dvarim Nifradim and Nivroim. That was the ultimate thing. And now we're spelling it out in the context of what impact that has on the clip in the Sitra Achra. It creates a field day for it. There's able to be a hemshekh, a toisvus unika to the chitzonim. But when it wasn't that, when it was not like that, when the setup was that there wasn't such a tzimtzum, there was no, they couldn't be makabel kedusha. Then the klipna sitra achra was in a state of shvala matzav. Was no, they weren't having an exciting, bountiful hashpah from kedusha. They had nothing. They were subservient to kedusha. This is the expression. They were shoyme lepri. So I think you'll find this actually very interesting if you look in the back of the English Tanya, which has the explanations of Rabbi Manuel Shochat. He gives the mystical concepts in Chabad Hasidism or in Hasidism. So if you look in his thing on Klippa and Sitra Achra, he has a very good explanation of this. Shoyme lepri. He makes it clear that the existence of Klippa can be convenient. What is the mashal of a Klippa? Klippa is a shell. So a shell, and we associate it with negative things, right? The shell. What is the problem with the shell? The shell of something hides the thing inside of it.
Right.
So we treat Klippa and Sitra Achra, the things that are the evil negative forces, we associate with something which is a helen v'heston elikus. That's why it's called a klippa. That's the moshel of a klippa. But on the other hand, a klippa also serves a very important function. When a fruit is growing, the klippa is a protection, right?
Yeah.
So you have different levels of klippa. You can have a regular fruit, an apple or a pear, where the klippa is not such a great protection. Protects it somewhat. The birds can still, can easily eat from it, right? It's just not a massive protection, but it's still a protection of some sort from the weather, from this, and through its color, it's able to absorb from the sun and in different ways. And I suppose also their colorings, those types of shells can also, of those skins and shells can be, and peels can attract in some ways and also repel different animals and different insects. Maybe there's something in the coloring. But when you have like a nut, when you have a very hard shell, that's a fantastic protection. You can fall off a tree and still not get ruined. Can't get pecked at by animals so easily. You have squirrels and stuff that can get to that can crack open the nuts. But broadly speaking, it's a shomer lepri, and it's necessary. So whilst the pri is small, and it needs space and time to grow, it functions as a protection.
How does that work?
So the clippers in Sitra Achra, ideally, when everything is perfect, doesn't mean they cease to exist, but they are muchnoim tachas hakdusha. They are completely subservient and a method by which to protect and to advance kedusha. So, if there are, for example, if there would be something that would be, harmful or distracting to Loim de Torah and Mekayme mitzvahs, then things that are klip and kedusha can protect them by damaging. If you think like enemies of Loim de Torah and Mekayme mitzvahs can be done away with by famines or by other things. You could say that's a klippa in some ways, because if it was used against Loim de Torah and Mekayme mitzvahs, it would be a negative thing. But it can be a shema lepri. Different ways in which forces in nature, which are klippas noiga, can be the tayelas, right? So we're going to stop there. I'm going to realize that this point is going to continue this way. We're going to have a bit more. The next paragraph I've bracketed that one off. It's very much in the Kabbalah of the Chaim Vital. And we also have further stuff from the Zohar, and we get to move on, or we make a sort of a summary of what we've been saying till now on Ayin Vav, and then we're going to try and make a similar point in relation to the first Pirush of Yisrael. Till now, we're only talking about the second Pirush of Lulav Harav and Rimash Me'atzeres. And what happens when you have the world created Midas Hadin, what impact that will have, and why, therefore, you can understand why the Eibusha would realize that there needs to be a shit of Midas Harachamim. You can't have a world just purely created with Midas Hadin. Okay?